Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Menachot daf Sadi Zayin. We're going to begin on Sadi Zayin about Aleph by the two dots about 15 lines down. So we were learning about the dimensions of the Shulchan and the Lechem Apanim, including the Arba Sinifin. So these vertical poles, which were of Shel Zahav Hayusham, they were gold and they were used to hold up the Shulchan, to hold the breads together. So minhanimili. So how do we know this? Omer Rav Katina Merkor, the pasuk says v'asisa karosav kapoisav v'chasiosav v'nakiyosav. So when it says karosav elu defusin, this is referring to the forms which held the lechem upon him. The kapoisav elu bazichin. This is referring to the spoonfuls for the frankincense. Kisaisav el sinifim. So we see it's actually grounded in the Torah itself that you have to have these special vertical poles. And the Menachot ilukanim, these were the reeds which were used to separate the challah so that they remained fresh. So this is right away question 9. Based on this pasuk, Elohim hakelim hamuskarim b'pasuk zeh. So these are the kelim referring to, again, the molds, the spoons for the lavoina, the supporting vertical poles, as well as the kanim, which were used horizontally to keep the bread fresh. So the question is like this. It says Asher Yusach behen shemesachin behen es alechem, and it was there to support and to hold up to cover the lechem. So Ma'asev Rabbi lo sidur hakanim v'lo netilas deichas the Shabbos. We didn't allow you to put these things in or off the shulchan on Shabbos, especially like we were talking about the kanim. Now the kanim really served an important purpose so that the bread would remain fresh. Now it's just clearly it's from the pasuk. So ma'in deichas the Shabbos. Why would you not say you should have to do it on Shabbos? Says Rashi, diafagav de'ein shvus b'mikdash. So you can say, well, there's no shvus in the mikdash, there's no din muks and everything, but havi tiltul, and it's not just tiltul, la mishum shvusu el de mixi kaboin v'saisis. This is actually question 10. Ezu iser Shabbos yesh b'lohoitzel hachnas, taking away or putting back the kanim from between the breads. So the problem is, it looks like construction or deconstruction, which of course are avos malachos. So the question is, it's din deraisa, so it has to be done l'chayra, so it should be done Shabbos. So hadam marav alam bilsahu. It's not a question. The Amri dinan klalim Rabbi Kiva, as we saw in yesterday's daf. Kol malacha shav shalal asayis me'erev Shabbos. If it's a malacha that you could have done before, then ein deichas Shabbos. So there's no excuse for you to be able to do it on Shabbos because you could have done it before, and let's say it doesn't create any kedushas hakuf or anything, so that's not a problem. So v'hani nami efshadol dachi Shabbos alayu. So for the same reason, these kanim, you don't have to put them on Shabbos. It's not necessary because time of mind lo ifish lechem. The whole purpose of the kanim to begin with is so that the breads don't get moldy. Now b'chi hai shiura lo mitapish. It's not going to get moldy because what's happening? These kanim, since they could not be on the shulchan, they won't be on the shulchan just for a short amount of time, as Rashi basically explains over here. Rashi says that what is this short amount of time? Sheshaimtin me'erev Shabbos. It's removed from Friday, so Arvit. L'machor b'chatzei yoyim misalkan u'masader acherim below kanim. So on Shabbos, you already remove the breads on Shabbos. So therefore, the breads, the older breads, are only not going to be on the shulchan without kanim. They'll be on the shulchan without kanim for just a short amount of time, and the new ones also will be there for a short amount of time because on Motzei Shabbos you'll just replace them, as the Gemara says. So you take them and you put them manichin l'arko shel shulchan. You put it on the length side of the shulchan. Motzei Shabbos, and then Saturday night, right after Shabbos, nichnas, you enter magbia roisha shel chal, and you put it into the chal. You lift it up. Umakdis kana tachte. You put the reeds underneath it. The chayzu magbia roisha shel chal, and then you can lift up the chal. Umakdis kana tachteha. That's basically what you do. So since it could be done anyway, not on Shabbos, and it's not going to cause any problems. It's not like ma'akev. It's just something which will help the breads from getting spoiled. But for the breads, not having this for such a short amount of time is not going to do anything. And then how many reeds are on each one? So it says like this. So arba chalos, richa, shloisha, shloisha kanim. So the 4 middle loaves will need 3 reeds. But the top ones on the top of the shulchan, you don't need as much because there's there's no pressure, just based on gravity. The breads that are on the top, there's nothing pushing them down. There's nothing above it, and therefore you don't need as many reeds. It won't get spoiled because it's not being like shoved into another one. The bottom ones, which you would think for sure would need a lot of reeds, al tihara shel shulchan, is put on the surface of the shulchan, which is also cold. It's not going to get moldy. So it's not hasim. Rameir oimer kol alma shahi b'mikdash beinanis. When it comes to an amma, how big is an amma? So it's possible an amma is 5 tvachim, it could be 6 tvachim. So beinanis is 6 tvachim. So all amos is going to be 6 tvachim. So, for example, when we're talking about a typical situation like the Aron maybe and the Shulchan, we'll talk about, okay, so Chutzmim is what we're going to delve into, so the Aron, the Shulchan, and then there's exceptions. Chutzmim, these, which we're going to see, are actually only 5 tefachim each Amma. Mizbeach HaZahav, the inner Mizbeach and the Kodesh, which we put the Ketairis, so there it was only 5, that Amma was 5 by 5. By Karen, V'Hasoive V'Yisoid. So we see clearly the Karen was 5 tefachim, which is the horns on the top of the Mizbeach. The Soivev V'Yisoid. Now the question is, when we say that it's 5, is it 5 in height, or is it 5 in vertically, in length? So we'll have to get to that. Rabbi Huda Eimer Amos ben, so Amos binyan shish tefachim. When it comes to building, for example, the walls of the Har Bayis, the Mizbech Oyla, so that was 6 tefachim. The Shel Kalim Chamisha. However, all the Kalim, so that was actually almost the of the Kalim, like for example the Aron, the Shulchan, that's 5. Rabbi Yochanan, so it was 5. Shel Kalim Chamisha. So this goes into our machlokas because we mentioned in yesterday's daf, when it comes to the Shulchan, it actually says beferish in the Psukim the dimensions. It says by the Shulchan, it's 2 amos long, 1 amma in width, and 1.5 amma in height. The problem is, how big is an amma? That's what the question is. So we had a machlokas, is it 10 in length and 5 in width, or 12 in length and 6 in width? So what does that mean? So if you hold that it's each amma is 6 tefachim, so therefore when we say it's 2 by 1, 2 amos by 1 amma, so that's 12 amos by 6, 12 tefachim by 6 tefachim. Or you could say it's 10 by 5. Why? Because if each amma of the Shulchan is only 5 tefachim, so therefore when it says it's 2 amos in length, that means it's 10 tefachim. And when it says it's 1 tefach in width, that means it's 5 tefachim. So the machlokas 12 by 6 versus 10 by 5 is totally on, is the Shulchan, when we measure the Shulchan, which is, again, 2 by 1 by 1.5 amos, is that an amma of 6 tefachim, or is an amma of 5 tefachim? So that's what we're getting at over here. So Rabbi Yochanan b'shtei mikra echad darshu. Ve'elu midos hamizbeach ba'amos. These are the measurements. Amma v'toifach. So let's continue on to Amid Beis. Then it says v'chika amma, and we're going to darshan this whole pasuk, the foundation of the mizbeach, which we're going to say v'amma roiche v'gvula el safata saviv zeres ha'echad. So what exactly is going on over here? So v'zeh gav hamizbeach. So chika mizbeach chika amma zeh yisoid. So we know that the way that the mizbeach is constructed, there was different levels. You started off ground level, and then you went up a little bit, and then the first foundation level is called the yisod. You go up a little bit, and then you have the next level, which is called the sovev. And then you go up, eventually you get to the top, and on each of the corners were the kronos, were the horns, if you will. So the question is, also when it comes to the mizbeach, are we dealing with when these amos, are they tfachim, are they 5, or are they 6? And just to make matters a little confusing, each element part of the mizbech, some of it was 5 and some of it was 6, and that there's actually going to be 3 different steps or 3 different opinions until we finally get to the third, which will be the maskana. So it says like this. So zeh yisoid ha'am amoreichiv zeh soiviv v'gavua el savata saviv zeres ha'echad il kronos zeh gav ha'mizbech zeh mizbech ha'zahav. Okay, so basically it's telling you this pasuk is mentioning all the dimensions, all the different parts of the mizbeach, the yisoid, the soiviv, the kronos. Fine. So Rameir Savar zehu ba'alma bas chamisha. It was actually 5 tfachim. Hakol almos kalim, all the almos of kalim were ba'alma bas sheish, was 6. Rabbi Yehuda Savar kazehu kol almos kalim so you would say like this: from the yesod until the, let's call it the middle part. It's not exactly the middle. We'll discuss where the soviv is to the middle. And the middle is very important. The middle is what we have, what's called the chutta sikra, and the zrikas hadam. Depending on what the carbon is, you have to make sure it's on the top or below. For example, the olas ha'ov had to be above the chutta sikra. The chatas ov had to be below the chutta sikra. Otherwise, it would be puzzle. The other way around, when it comes to an ola, has to be below the chutta sikra. The chatas has to be above the chutta sikra. So we think in this first stage that miyasoid v'ad soive b'ambabas hey, it was 5, and therefore b'goiva in height, and therefore from the ground basically until the sovev you had 30 tfachim total. Okay, so it was 5 tfachim and it was 6 high, so therefore that represented 30 tfachim. Machika alma v'alma roichev, so hachikaimer machika alma v'ad roichev alma bas chamisha, that all the way from the bottom basically until the sovev was 5, and therefore it ends up equaling the up until the sovev is 30. Goiva hamizbeach kamehavi eser amos, and we know that the height was 10 amos, which you would think that should just mean 60, but again it's only 60 if you're measuring continuously with 6 tfachim, an am of 6 tfachim. If you measure it with 5 tfachim, so maybe it's only 50 tfachim high. So is it 50? Is it 60? Is it somewhere in between? So that's what we're going to be getting at here. So we said that shis b'nei shis, the top 6 of it was b'nei chamisha. As I said, the 6 of the amos were 5, chamisha. Namely from the bottom until the yesod, until the sovev was each almost 5 tfachim, and therefore that would be 5 times 6 is 30. The arboy, and then the top 4 almos, were b'nei shisa, right? We're 6 tfachim each. Okay, so if that's the case, so 6 times 4 is 24. So you have the top 4 almos, which is 6 tfachim each, equals 24. The bottom 6 amos, which are 5 tfachim each, is 30. So if you add 24 and 30, you're going to get to 54. So according to this interpretation, we're going to say that the height of the yesod and everything else, it's talking about 5 tfachim, which will make it 54. We'll see the significance of why this will be problematic. So let's continue Gemara. So b'nei chamisha arba b'nei shisa. So mizbech kami havi, so chamshin v'arba. It ends up being 54. Okay, so then therefore palgan mizbech, because we want to know exactly where the chutta sikra is, so we have to divide into 2 where the middle part is. So half of 50 kama havi esem v'shiva, it would be 27 tfachim. So mekronos v'ad sovev, from the kronos until the sovev. Again, if we're talking about the whole thing is 54, and we're dealing with 27 is where the chutta sikra is, it's 24, as we say, because 6 times 4. We already said that. Until from the soivev up is 4 almos. The last 4 almos, 6 tfachim each, that's 24. So that means at the sovev, if you're standing at the sovev, you can go as far as 3 more tfachim down before you hit the chut hasikra. If you go any further than 3 tfachim down below that, then you're applying, let's say, the olas ha'of underneath the chut hasikra, which will be puzzle. So what's the problem with that? So let's see. So batzul apal the mizbeach tlasa. So there's 3 tfachim below it, right? 3 tfachim below to get to the chut hasikra, but none. Chut shel sikra chaygrub emsa. We know it's in the middle. Kedei lahadu ben damim elyonim damim taftainim. So this way we know exactly what the cutoff point is of where we sprinkle the blood. Now, el hadisanya gabi olos ha'of, which again has to be on the above it, or at least even if it hits it, but it can't ever be below it. Hay oilu bekeves. You're on the ram. Upainu l'sayvev. You get to the sayvev. Now, what we said at the sovev, you are at number 24, and therefore the chut hasikra is only 3 below. Uvolo keren duremis mizrach. As you get to the southeastern corner, moilikas reishim arpa. You do the malik on the back of its neck. Umavdu, and you separate it. Moitzas dama el keren mizbech, and you do the zrika on the mizbech. Now, even if you do it below your feet, because the Kohen is standing on the sovev, if you alma achas kshera. Now, this is a big problem, because hakayoyev el yoynu lamata mishnei tfachim. Now, even if you want to tell me that we're dealing with 5 tfachim, but below the sovev is only 3 tfachim to get to the chut hasikra. So how is it possible? Because if we're saying it's 54, and half of 54 is 27, and the sovev is at 24, you only have 3 tfachim below the sovev, but it says here you could apply it even an amma below the sovev. So that can't be the right dimensions. El chekam ha'ama, when we're talking about the chika amma, it's kenisa. It's talking about it's horizontal, not the height. Amma roichev is kenisa. There's also the horizontal part. Gavula el savata saviv kenisa. So basically, we're going to say that they're all talking not the height, but rather, in other words, we're going to say that the whole height is really 60. And when we mention that some parts are 5, that's only the vertical part. That's only, pardon me, the horizontal part. The vertical part is always 6. And therefore, when it says it's 10 amos, it means it's 60 tfachim. Half of 60 is 30. So again, if we imagine that the sovev is at 24, so then it makes sense. You can go 6 below, or an amma, which is 6 tfachim below, and it'll hit the chut hasikra, which we're going to see. So that's going to be the second interpretation, which seems to make sense, that what we're actually going to say is that the height is actually 6 tfachim. And when we say that these things are 5, it's only referring to its horizontal part. Okay, so let's see this. So Gavul Svasa Savi Kanisam is Kamahavi Le Sheetin. We know it's 60 because we said it's 10 amos high. So therefore, if the entire thing from the bottom all the way up is 6 tfachim per amma, so that's 60. So Paganam is Kamahavi Tlas is 30. Mikronas Vad Soviv Kamahavi Chavdalad. We already said that if the Kohen is at the Soviv, he's at number 24. So Kamir Basel Paganam is how much below can he go? Shisha. And Vitanan im asal matam ragla fil ama achas kshera, which ama achas is the 6 tfachim, right? So it sounds like a good answer, right? So this is the second interpretation, that there's 24 above the chutas, 24 above the sovev, 36 below it. And therefore, again, if you split it in between, half of 60 is 30. So you can be on the sovev, and it can even go 6 below to the chut hasikra, right? And that wouldn't be a problem. Okay. Okay. So that sounds pretty good. So b'mayikimta b'kanisa, so we're saying that everything that says is 5 tfachim is not the height, but it's the horizontal. So can you say that? But Tanan Mizbech was 32 by 32. Oil Amma, the Amma, it went up an Amma, the Kanas Amma, then went in an Amma. Zay Yisait. Nimsa Shloishim al Shloishim. So we find it's 30 by 30. Shloishim, so Shloishim Shnei Tfachim Havi. It's 30 and 2 Tfachim. Basu. Allah keves. If it went up it went up another 5. from the Yesod to the Sovev. V'kanas Alma, then went in an Alma, Zeh Sovev. Nimsa, Esrim V'shmoina, Esrim V'shmoina. So it's 28 by 28. Again, referring to the not the height, but we're talking about, of course, the size. So if in fact we're saying, again, it was 32 by 32, then it went up, by 1, then by 5, right? So Esrim V'shmoina v'arba tefachim havi. So that maybe it's not so important to mention this distinction because it's not an alma. So makom kronos alma mizeh alma mizeh. The kronos, the horns on the top of the mizbech, were an alma by an alma. Nimsa esrim v'sheish al esrim v'sheish. So it's 26 by 26. So esrim sheva havi. Now all of a sudden becomes 27 because the discrepancy of the tefachim being smaller in not 6 but by 5 tefachim. So you're knocking off on both sides, tefachim, until you finally get a smaller amount of space, or versus a larger amount of space. So your answer is a little duck. So makam hilach hakohanim, the amount of space for the kohanim to walk, amim mizeh on the top of the mizbeach. So nimsa, after you remove that, and again it's an am on both sides, so you actually would subtract 2. Nimsa esrim v'arba al esrim v'arba of 24. So makam hamaracha esrim v'chamisha havi. It's maybe 24. It should be 25. The chitei mahachinami, because if we're talking about not 6 tefachim but 5 tefachim. So actually, because of that, it makes the top larger. That's the whole point. So these numbers are not accurate. Fine. Nim sarbar al esem v'arba makom hamaracha esem v'chamisha havi. V'chita machanam l'dog v'oksiv hariel shtem esri orech was 12 in length. B'shtem esri orech 12 in width. Ravua square. Yachol shteinu el shtem esri 12 by 12. Kishu oimer el arbas ravuav. The 4 of each of the 4 corners. Melamed shem emsa hu moedid. We're measuring in the middle. Shtem esri amol chol ruach from each side. The chi tema shisminaihu, the 6 regarding the 6 original almos mikara ba'almabas chamisha maisilhu, and it's really 5. So imkin rabchalhu azara. So all of a sudden now there's a different space in the azara. Did not call azara haisa arich meya v'shmoinim v'sheva 187 al reichiv meya v'shloishim v'chamish by 135. Memizrach Lamar from east to west. Meya Shmoinim V'Sheva 187 was Makom Derisas Ragli Yisrael. Achas Esrei Alma was fine. So when it comes to Makom Derisas Ragli Yisrael, Achas Esrei Alma was 11. The Makom Derisas Ragli Kohanim Achas Esrei Alma 11. The Mizbeach Shloishim Mishtayim. It says clearly here is 32. Bein Ulma Mizbeach. So heichel meya alma achas asara alma or chori beis apareiches. So anyway, the problem is that it's pretty clear that these dimensions that we're mentioning cannot be that we're only talking about the height being exactly 6 tefachim and there's only 5 tefachim in, because if that happens, then the size of the top of the mizbech is not in accordance to these measurements that we've been saying. So therefore, we're going to come up to a final answer, not that it was 54 total. Not that it was 60 total, but we're going to end up getting some middle ground over here, 58. Elachika ama begoiva, which actually we're talking about the chika ama is the height. The height is 5 tefachim. Amareichiv kenisa gavula el sfata saviv. So continue to Sadi Chesam and Aleph. Lo shna hachim lo shna hachi. Mizbeach kam havi. So how much was the mizbeach? Chamshin v'tamni. It's 58. So how do we get to 58? So we were saying that until the Saviv it was 24, but actually it's only 23 because the Karanis were actually not 6, but there's only 5 in height, and therefore that shaves off 1 more tefach. So instead of it being 24 to the Saviv, it's actually 23. For that matter, on the bottom, instead of it being 36. We said the Yesod, that also is only 5 tefachim. So therefore, instead of it being 24 and 36, it's 23 and 35, equaling 58. in height, so that half of 58 is 29. So the Chut HaSikra is actually going to be on 29, but the Sovev is at 23. So again, 6 below the 23 is still going to be okay, because that will be where the Chut HaSikra is at 29. Okay, so that's what we're going to see here. That's going to be the Maskana. Lo shna hachi, lo shna hachi, Mizbeach kamahavi chamshem v'tamni, 58. Pagad Mizbeach kamahavi is Esther and Vitesha. Half of 58 is 29, right? That's where the Chut HaSikra is. So where Kronos we had Soivev Kamahavi, from the Kronos until the Soivev is only Esther and Vitlasa. It was only 23, right? So you end up having 29 minus 23 equals our 6. So Kami Batzul Apalgadim Mizbeach Shisa, the Nani Masal Lamata Maragov Hill Amoachas Kshera. So Eganami the Chika Alma Ba'alma Soivev Ba'alma Roichev Shema Mina. So again, that is the Maskana. So we're gonna stop there. Let's look at question TA 16. Hayesod Vasovev Akranois Hayu Ba'alma Bas Chamisha Tfachim. It says that there were 5. Now we said that all of them cannot be talking about 5 tfachim high, because then it would, even though it would make sense, because 60 minus half of 60 is 30, and if the soiv is at 24, so then 6 is an amma below, it's still okay, but it doesn't match all these other dimensions. So we couldn't say that. And on the other hand, we couldn't say that it was only 54, namely that we were talking about the height was 5 tfachim for the entirety of the bottom, from the bottom all the way to the soivev, making it 54, half of being 27. The problem is that the sovev being that hits at 24, so then you only 3 tfachim below, but it says you can even hit it 6 tfachim below, but that would be below the Chut HaSikra. Therefore, we're forced to say, and this is question TA 16, Hayesod v'asovev akranois hayu ba'alma bas chamish tfachim. So when it comes to the Yesod and the Karanos, we have already established that certainly when it comes to them, that is begoiva, right? The height, right? The height is only 5 tfachim per amma, okay? And when it comes to the soivev, we say that's bekanisa. That's going in is 5 tfachim. However, when it comes to the Karanos, even though we did say for sure the height is 5 tfachim, it's not so clear when it comes to Kanisa, the Kronos. That is not mashma either way, whether it's 5 or 6 going inward, the Kronos. It was 1 amma by 1 amma, but that's not so clear. But again, Lamaskana, basically we're saying is that even though it's 10 amos, we don't know what an amma is. Is it 6 tfachim or is it 5 tfachim? So we end up measuring all the way to the top, ends up being 58. Half of 58 is 29. The sovev was at 23, and therefore can go another 6 below the Chut HaSikra, and therefore would still be kosher. Adkan.